Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week, you'll notice we don't have a guest. It's just going to be the regular team. We're going to be chatting and having a bit of a magical learning kind of catch-up. Magical Learning is a training and facilitation company that's been running for over 25 years, partnering with global thought leaders like John Mattone and Robin Sharma. Anyway, we've got that exciting team to join us today, and what better place to start than with our CEO extraordinaire, Graham. How's your week been? How's things?
Hey, Jez. Hi, everyone. I've had a good week, busy week running lots of classes with people from around the country, enjoying the slightly cooler temperatures while they're around. And we had some really nice rain early in the week, which is great. And, it's Friday. Well, it is as we record this. For those of you who are listening to or watching this later thinking, no, it's not. Well, it was. And that's exciting because there's only 3 more sleeps until Monday. So I'm pumped.
Very nice. Well, great to have you on, Graham, and happy Friday to those who celebrate on the day they're listening. Danette, our Director of Learning, how are you going this week?
Yeah, good, Jez. So I have been travelling a bit this week. So had a workshop in Canberra, had one in Sydney this week. I'm in Canberra at the moment, but as Graham said, we got rain. So the tank went from 65% to 80% full, which is awesome because that's where all the water for the farmhouse comes from. So super, super important. And super excited because this time next week, I will be in Melbourne. So we will be doing in-person, potentially, podcast and catching up with the kids. And might I just say, Mamma Mia, Leggers, next week. Very excited. So it's been a great week, Jez.
No, it's great to have you on, Danette, and very excited. We'll have to see you next week. Stay tuned if you enjoy this episode to see how that changes for next week. Very exciting. Leggers, speaking of graphic design extraordinaire, how are you going? How's your week?
My week's been good. Just been sort of doing some work and tinkering away at my new website. I've sort of changing over from more portfolio to more service-based in terms of my little ABN. So trying to get that up and running and doing some new branding and stuff for that. So there'll be a launch update in a later podcast coming up. And then another fun thing is I cracked out my slow cooker for the first time in a very long time. And I made like a little lamb pomegranate and couscous sort of a dish because pomegranates are now back in season here in Australia. So in terms of that, it was pretty good. But yeah, so that's been my week. Pretty good.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, good to have everybody on this week. And this week, as I mentioned, we don't have a guest. So we like to do something a little different when we don't have a guest. And we haven't had just a team podcast in a little while. So we like to do something called a Concept Sandbox. Okay. And I'm going to explain what this is. It sounds complicated, but it's actually a really fun way to have a conversation about business, but set it in a kind of fun and fantastical realm. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking today about the concept of bringing back old ways. Okay. So we're going to, whatever that inspires for us, we're going to be chatting about that, but simultaneously we're going to be talking about a business problem in a fantastical realm. Now, I hope you don't mind, but this week I've kind of been feeling this realm, if people are okay with it. I was thinking usually we've picked something fantastic, like I think we've done Narnia, we've done Peter Pan, we've done a bunch of different sort of settings for this. This week I was kind of feeling a bit inspired, a bit of ancient Greece. So I was thinking, how do people feel about doing a bit of a Zeus kind of, and the business problem this week is Zeus is trying to generate electricity, right? His business is trying to generate electricity, but he himself, he's doing a lot of it, but he's trying to find out other ways to maybe expand the energy business other than just his lightning, okay? That's kind of where he is. So as a business, he's trying to think of other ways he can maybe do something with what Zeus's electricity is and do a little bit more. So we'll keep that kind of cooking away in the back burner. Let's just keep that sort of hidden away. We'll almost forget about it. And let's jump into our conversation today about bringing back old ways. So I might start with Leggers here today, Leggers. So Leggers, do you want to tell us about what bringing back old ways means to you?
When I saw the topic bringing back old ways, obviously there's a lot of unfavorable things in the past that we wouldn't want to bring back. But some things that I've sort of thought about, and I've been seeing, I guess, more ads for it as well, is sort of like handcrafting things, like creating things with your hands. So like some examples of this would be sewing or crocheting or painting or woodworking, or I've been seeing like ring making classes and like all of this sort of stuff. And I think like part of that would be like, because people are spending so much more time with technology that's very like screen based or laptop, or, you know, sort of there's a keyboard involved and a screen involved. I feel like people are sort of missing part of maybe the tactileness of creation, because it's so easy now, especially with like AI. You can whip up art in a second, and you know, you don't have to write anything from your brain. You can just type in a prompt and it will write something for you. And I think, like, while that's very convenient, and especially in capitalism, I think like a lot of the time creative work is now just being sort of turned into AI, because it's not like, I guess people don't favor creativity as much in late stage capitalism, because like all of these things usually take a lot of time. And if you're paying the artist a lot of money, you know, and so when sort of, you know, corporations and stuff have the option to replace sort of the marketing department with an AI, we sort of lose, I guess, the essence of what art is. And, you know, this applies to different things other than just sort of like image art. But I think, like, yeah, we're losing touch with, I guess, like the physicality of creation. And I think, you know, yeah, as I said, like, I think the thing that capitalism demands of you is time and your sort of like focus. And a lot of these things require time and focus. And if you're doing it as a hobby outside of earning something from it, just for the sake of creation. So yeah, so I was thinking, bring back some of these old school things where it's like you're actually physically doing a hobby or like learning a new skill. Like, I've been really interested in my friend Hillary, also announcing on the pod she just bought a house. So she, her and I have had plans of sort of doing up her house, but it's like learning, I want to learn some DIY stuff. And it's like, in this day and age, I don't have to learn any DIY stuff. I can hire other people to do it for me. But I want to learn the tactile skills that sort of come along with that sort of stuff. And, you know, like, if I had more garden space, I would be trying to plant a bigger garden and grow my own food. And like, that takes a lot of time in terms of waiting for it to actually be, you know, you get fruitful, so to speak. But, you know, it's like, I think the sort of the slow reward of like putting in time and effort slowly over time and to build something, I think we've sort of lost a bit of touch with that on the day to day. And I think that, yeah, in my opinion, bring them back.
Love that, Legers. And I think that's it's a good topic. It's actually kind of also what I was thinking a little bit, to be honest. So I might kind of dig into this, and then
Yeah.
I'll sort of talk about where we can get into Zeus and his business. So I have been thinking a bit more. There's a stat that jumped out to me recently, and I thought it was very fascinating, which is that social media usage peaked in 2022. So people are using social media less than they did in 2022, which is fascinating because it doesn't seem like that doesn't seem like the current narrative. But what's happening is that was the second year of lockdown. So obviously we're looking at people more time at home, more time with their phones alone. But since then, people have been doing a bit of what Leggers is talking about, and kind of a bit more is going a bit more back into the physical world, a bit more into actually hanging out with people. And something that I feel like I've been thinking about recently is the concept of de-technologizing. While everything's kind of heading in the direction of putting more technology into everything, making it faster and everything, I feel like the pace may be almost too fast for what our system was built to handle. So I think even if our work is at a certain speed, for me, I've been really trying to slow down in other ways, whether that be thinking of board games or thinking of, different workouts or, different things where you can kind of go back to activities that existed prior to the TV. But I even find sometimes going back just a little bit, like I find there's a difference between playing a game that was made for the Nintendo 64 than a game that was made for the PlayStation 4, probably about 20 years difference in their development. But with the Nintendo 64, the games were made to be released, and then that was the final version. With the PS4, they're constantly updating it. So you often get unfinished products shipped, and you end up with this buggy game because they can do that. Whereas back in the day, the bugs were just part of the game and that was just it. And I actually find that sort of almost non-internetized games have a different flavor to them, which I actually quite enjoy. So anyway, that's just one example, but I have been sort of thinking about the concept of de-technologizing. And I guess to just kind of bring this into the Zeus realm, and then we can sort of go to Danette and Graham and we can start talking about other things. If Zeus maybe is hearing this and thinking about his energy company, could he be thinking of more practical things he could be handing out? Or maybe selling little electrical building kits to get people those practical skills, how to make a little microchip or something like that uses the energy. Anyway, these are just some different ideas of ways the business could expand at the beginning. But yeah, I'll throw over to you.
I actually am happy to go because it's sort of in line with what I was going to talk about, but also about the farm that my grandfather built, so which could help Zeus as well. So my bit about the whole going back to the old days, bring back some of the old days things, was really about connection. So what you were saying, both Allegra and Jeremy, was, whether it's connecting with your friends to help, do up a house, create new things from a creative perspective, playing board games, etc. All of that's around connection. And I think I like that there is there's definitely a space for our brain to de-technologize. Did I say that correctly, Jez? By coming together and connecting where we can face to face to be able to enjoy each other's company. And it requires us to slow down because when we speed up, we lose our manners. We forget the pleases and thank yous. We forget to actually listen to understand. So I think all of that, is stuff that I'd like us to sort of come back to a little bit more because it makes us human. And that's what I think distinguishes us from AI and helps us value add. For Zeus, I love that idea of perhaps him selling things that they can create their own stuff. When my grandfather built the house that we live in, there was no electricity. So literally he built it before technology, like electricity. And so the water was in a tank that was in the roof that came off the roof and then was gravity fed into the house. And so I wonder whether part of what Zeus thinking, he just doesn't want to use his lightning, is looking at, let's go back to what did people do before electricity? How did they create stuff and build stuff that let them live a good life? And, whether they build it themselves, like go back to ancient Rome or something like that, or whether they build it with friends, etc., or whether someone else builds it. But looking at, there was technology that's been around for very long times that some of it we've forgotten about that could actually be helpful. So I love the idea of Zeus definitely selling those packs, but maybe also looking at what was created, in ancient times, etc. And sometimes maybe here's where we could go a little bit IT-like and open source. So maybe part of his business is open sourcing it, what he finds from ancient technology, etc., and giving it to the world as a bit of a philanthropy part of business because, good business also helps their community. So anyway, that's my ideas. Love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So there could be a philanthropy element to Zeus's electricity. Let's go, Graham, I might throw to you. What did you want to talk today about bringing back old ways?
There's so much to unpack in this. Some of the things that Leg has shared, I was almost going to jump up and go and grab one of my bow ties because I have a bow tie that was, well, I'm going to assume it was because the lovely person who sold it to me online told me that it was handmade and it was made by somebody in Russia back in the day when Russia was still full of really, and it still is, it's on the nose only because they've got a bunch of numpties running it. But I do like the idea of Leg was talking about that. It's almost like the physical connection with creativity. So if you just give it to a bot to create, and then because so much of what we so much in the art space today is digitized, so you can just give it to a bot. You just bang away on the keyboard for 5 minutes and push enter or whatever the hell you do. I don't know. I don't care. But there seems to be a disconnect between that. And then Jeanette was also talking about connection, but on a human level. And then it sort of got me thinking about the connection as a human being with the things that we create. And I wonder whether, is there the same level of connection for someone who creates a digital thing as there is for somebody who creates, a handmade pen, in a manner of speaking, using timber and a pen kit on a lathe, or who creates a handmade bow tie, or who. So I don't know. Where am I going with all this? Who knows? Who knows? It's Friday. The bringing back the old ways thing's also really dangerous for me because I just go straight back to, well, when I was young, dirt was just invented, and that was a fun thing back then. Zeus and lightning. I was even going to say, well, hang on, why don't we just get Zeus to email or text Ben Franklin? Except, slightly different timeline. I think one of the Lega's other comments about, sorry, this really is a ramble, just the whole capitalism thing and progress for the sake of progress. I will probably inappropriately quote, I think it was Ryan Halliday in one of his books, and he was talking about putting your seat back on an airplane on a long flight. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that rings a bell for me with so much of what we're doing as a species at the moment. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. So for me, bringing back the old ways, the one thing, if I can just wrap this up, which I will, would be reconnecting with other human beings as human beings without devices, however you do that. That's the thing that we will, I think, come to regret more than anything else, is the fact that we lose that. So, soapbox moment over. And just a quick heads up, folks, I am literally going to run away in about 10 minutes' time. I do apologise. For the 1.5 million of you watching this thinking, oh, thank God for that, you're welcome.
So my thoughts, based on what Graham was just saying, it reminded me of something else. And this sort of links back to magical learning a little bit more specifically. But with education, there's been a lot of studies with how people retain knowledge and how they learn. And it's been essentially proven that like the introduction of technology, especially in children, to learning has actually been detrimental to learning. So kids now actually have worse scores than their parents did, when hypothetically throughout all of history, it's always been going up. Like the next generation should be better off than the last generation because we've learned things in that generation. But essentially, they found that, introducing laptops early instead of handwriting stuff, bad. The teacher using the big whiteboard screen with, the slides and stuff, that's not good. And like more places, like I've seen that they're trialing in other countries, like AI teachers, essentially, where it's essentially a computer is teaching your children. And while that might seem, potentially good in theory, I don't know, to some people, AI companies, it actually has been shown that children especially learn much better from a person. So the more that the screen does in terms of teaching our children, and this is, you've heard of iPad kids and stuff, like this is sort of an extension of that, because this is also, we're trying to actively teach them to use these things, and they don't know how to do things without these things now. So we've sort of lost a bit of knowledge in this sort of latest generation of kids who are using technology a lot more. And so I think like based on like the studies and stuff, we should actually be, and this sort of leaps and combines all of the things, but it's like we should be de-technologizing the classroom to create more human connection and use our hands physically more to create things. to have better retention. And so that was my little thought, because I'd seen a couple of little things on that recently.
I love that because Leggers is right. There's a lot of studies at the moment looking at education and how we take in information. So I love a good notebook and pen, and I'm always writing, because my way of learning, I struggle to recall what's said, so I have to write it down. But writing down, we retain that much better than if we're typing it in. And this is even as adults, but as kids, if you think about what's a fundamental skill we need our kids to learn, it's yes, technology, totally, it's a tool, but we need to learn to work with other people, because collaboration is one of the ways that we get smarter, because we learn different perspectives and stuff. And yes, I'm not saying don't use technology, but use it as a tool, and use it where we're mindful of the impact, particularly of little brains, where I was listening to a Diary of the CEO the other day, and they were talking about the short form videos, how they really mess young children's brains. Like, they do it to adults as well. Adults' brains can recover. It's really bad for the young brains because they get less and less attention span. And if you think of one of the brilliant things we bring to the world is our ability to focus. So I'd love to take this then to Zeus to think about, when he's thinking about electricity and other ways of doing things, how does he do it in a way that, has that not just short-term impact? If we're thinking about running a good business, it's also how do we create that long-term sustainable stuff? So lightning might be part of it, but there might be other things that maybe when he gets together with his friends and they do stuff with their hands and stuff like that, maybe they'll create a new technology that doesn't hurt the planet and helps power society forward and increase connection. I don't know. They're just my ideas, random.
Well, no, I like that, because I think I can tie some of this together here with a sort of metaphor, and then I'll grab some final thoughts from Graham before he has to jump off. But there's one example to me that's a really good example of all of everything we've been talking today about how art can be it can have different impacts, and technology can assist with that, though it can also make it worse. And to me, a great example of this, it's my personal favorite, is the video game Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 is the highest rated video game on the PlayStation 2, which is the most widely sold video game console of all time. So it's technically the most popular game in theory ever, even though a lot of people would not think of it in that way. And really the charm of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 is that a lot of the team, like when you look at the behind the scenes videos of the making of the game, it's very silly. Like some of the missions are literally getting someone's tongue unstuck from a light pole that they've licked when it's cold. It's missions that are not really anything to do with skating. It's more just about silliness, having fun. And when you look at these videos behind the scenes, it's like they had a competition at the studio to see who could do a kickflip first, and they filmed it on like an old VCR recorder. Everyone in the whole studio is trying to do it. So there was a sort of sense of fun, and what that's led to is a sort of interesting legacy of the game, which is that it's a really fun game. And so they recreated it recently with new graphics last year. Okay, and what's interesting is they have the same missions, they've got better graphics, everything about it technically should be better, but it's worse. It's like lost this soul to it. Like all these little details that were added in by like each programmer that wanted to add their own little joke, or each, that created the culture of the whole video game together, which I think everybody then loved because there were so many personal elements that made it unique and fun. All of that in the remake kind of got stripped away or just stayed as it was, and it felt stale, and it felt like the remake lost the philosophy of the original, which was to have fun while you're making it. It felt like they just tried to make an exact replica. And so the irony is, even with better technology, you would never remake the remake because it was so much worse than the original, even though the original came out a long time ago. And I think another way to just put a tiny fine point on that is just how cheats have developed in video games. They used to be really silly, like people having a huge head, or like gravity doesn't exist or something like that. Now those don't really exist in games. Games are a bit more of a serious format. And I think with that silliness, this is to tie in the capitalism element and all this, with that silliness, we've lost that, because I think a lot of things are a bit more about the bottom line. And so when you think about going back to the old ways, maybe it's sometimes thinking about being a bit silly and having a little bit of almost lower stakes to allow for more interesting creativity. Anyway, Graham, that was a long spiel. I'm going to throw over to you. Did you have any final thoughts today on today's conversation?
No, thanks, Jess. I think some really good comments in there, and it was good spiel. I was just wondering if we said Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, if we repeat that 16 times between now and the end of the podcast, do we get a commission? And because we should.
I'll reach out to Activision.
Yeah, we could spend a year talking about capitalism and why it's ruining, or why it's just destroyed planet Earth, and it's sending us the way of the dodo, I think, at some point. But if we were going to just try and take a step back, and I love the idea of fun and going back to some of the earlier technology, because it was a lot less about money, a lot less about profit, and a lot more about enjoyment and experience. If there were just one thing that we could possibly do as human beings, it's just go back to the old way of actually connecting with another human being face to face, in person, without technology. Start there. That's it for me. Sorry, folks. Thank you for the opportunity. Hope you have an awesome week. See you soon.
And Graham, it's been lovely to connect with you via a screen.
Irony? Anyone? Bueller? Yeah, I know. Anyway, I'm just going to go and hug myself.
That's a good. Well, Danette, I might get your thoughts then. Did you have any final thoughts on bringing back old ways in today's conversations?
Yeah. So this is definitely not about chucking everything that we've currently got and going, we need to go back to the good old days, because there was some crap in the good old days, as Allegra definitely pointed out at the start. I do love the fact that, AI and IT and all those things, they're great tools. How we as humans stay strong and get better and stuff like that are through connection. So if we can get face to face, yes, doing stuff like this online, absolutely it helps where it can. I love what Allegra talked about, starting to use our hands again, because if you think about it, if I create something, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I get a sense of purpose and a sense of fulfillment when I create something, even if it was supposed to be a vase and it looks like not a vase when I create it, for argument's sake, because it's unique. And it also reminds us, because a lot of people strive for perfection, that actually the beauty in most things is not that they're perfect. It's actually when we create them that I took the effort, took the time to do this stuff. And I think for Zeus, when he's creating his business, he has the strength of his lightning, but getting together with some other gods to perhaps bring in some of their gifts, talking to other stakeholders like humans and that, to go, okay, what is it we need and what serves us not just today, but the longer term? So yes, currently we need money in capitalism, and short-term making lots of gains, but long-term cost, not yet necessarily good for anyone. So maybe a little bit of balance there as well. But I love today's discussion. There were so many good points raised. So I like these team discussions too. Thank you.
No, that's all right. Great idea. And Danette, I think sort of thinking of that last point where you're talking about handcrafting things, and actually even thinking of sort of the era that Zeus is from. I don't know if viewers or even people today on the call have watched the TV show Forged in Fire. Have you watched this show?
No.
So it's a reality fun competition show. I highly recommend people just checking out an episode. But the idea is it's a blacksmithing competition that's
nice.
that's like a reality show.
Yep.
And what's fascinating is, like you see them create swords, shields, bits of armor and what have you from bits of metal. And you realize that each individual one of those is so different, and because it's handcrafted, like they're all assigned to make the exact same thing, and each one has its own unique properties. Some are sharper, some are heavier, some are stronger. And I think, like, when you think of it with the handcrafting element of it, like everything that you handcraft is going to be unique. And I think that that's almost the difference between it and digital, is there's going to be a really unique element to anything handcrafted that can't really be replicated. While you can make unique things digitally, there's always just that additional human element of handcrafting that I think creates something. So for Zeus, if there's a way to convert lightning into. I heard that in science recently they froze light for a brief amount of time in a crystal. So maybe there's some cool, interesting sort of technology meets the lightning to create some sort of interesting product that people might like. That's a little bit whimsical, even to go back to some of the other things we're talking about as a bit of an older time, back in the old ways kind of approach.
And Jez, just following on from that, when we handcraft stuff, we appreciate it. Because we put that effort in. And I was thinking earlier when we were talking about, digital versus not digital, that if we nowadays take so many photos on our cameras, our digital cameras, whereas I remember when my parents used to go and get the photos processed and we would go through the photos and like, oh, look at that. No, that one's really bad and stuff. But we then put them in albums and stuff. And now... yeah, and I've still got some of those old albums where I'll look back at the old photos, whereas we tend to collect all this digital stuff and maybe we don't savor it as much because it's a little bit easier. So that friction of making sometimes also, I think, helps us appreciate when we don't have that friction, which we live in a society that loves no friction, but then do we also appreciate what we're creating? So anyway, it's just a question that my brain came up with just then. Love this discussion.
I think that's a great question to sort of give our listeners and viewers to think about. That's a great concept. Thanks, Danette. Lakers, did you have any final thoughts today on bringing back old ways and any ideas, tips for Zeus?
Well, I feel like we've all sort of had a similar sort of train of thought with this, which is sort of the idea of de-technologizing and doing things in person and connecting with something in a physical sense as opposed to sort of a digital sense. But like, I think I've had like, I guess some additional thoughts, but it's like, even like, if you think about it, I think the things that are handcrafted are also the most expensive things. Like if you're buying a handcrafted table, that's going to set you back a lot more than an IKEA table, for example. And so it's like society does value these things. Well, parts of society values these things. And like we place more worth on the physical thing. Because like, even with art, if you go to a museum, you're not getting prints of digital artwork. Like it's all physical media. And so I think there's definitely like a line where people actually do appreciate the physical thing, and a handcrafted thing. Usually these are more expensive though. So again, capitalism playing into this. Not everyone can afford to buy or support these sort of physical medias. And that's a real shame because unfortunately, like a lot of these people who want to do these things full time cannot, because it's, once you earn a name, usually you can have a living from that. But getting yourself to have a name is usually a many-year sort of project. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think like, I encourage all of our listeners to sort of get back into making things for yourself, like even today I knitted this little headband that I'm wearing now. But even like I've given myself tattoos, like, and they're not perfect by any means, and there's dots outside the line sort of a vibe, but I really love them because I made them, and I have, I guess, for myself, the line for like the standard is slightly lower than if someone else was maybe to give it to me. But I enjoyed the creation of it, and therefore I'm proud to have it on myself. So yeah, like I think get back into the sort of less screen, more doing aspect, and whether that's just seeing people and doing something together or making something by yourself. It's all about connection. So, and then I was trying to think of a Zeus thing, but is there any way that Zeus could like get together with the other gods? Because like there's Poseidon, right? I think he's part of that thing for the water, right? Because electricity, the way that we make it currently is boiling water. So is there a way that maybe like Hades and Poseidon could create some level of like, it's sort of if the heat is coming up from, is Hades the hell or the guy?
It's both.
Okay. So if okay, perfect. So if there's like a small funnel, if they sort of, a volcano maybe, or underwater volcano, in sort of like a sustained pond or something, and then they develop a technology to catch the steam. That would be renewable and also perpetual, and that could take off at least part of the load of Zeus trying to power everything. Because I think like we don't just create electricity, there's other means of doing it. So, Zeus doesn't have to do this all by himself. He can talk to the community and figure out potentially alternative means. Because like, also, is there a sun god? Because could they figure out solar, potentially alternative methods of power creation? I don't know if this is too off track or if I was meant to go specifically for Zeus' company.
You've teed me up to just absolutely land the plane here, Leggers.
Okay, here we go.
We'd call it, we add all these gods together. It's called Mission Olympossible. Olympossible. Anyway, no, so that's perfect, Leggers. And I was going to say a good way to start. I have this on my desk available for when I've just got some downtime. Is a tiny little mini knockoff Lego pack. So it's not as expensive as Lego. That I can just build in my free time. Well, anyway, thank you all so much for being on the Magical Learning Podcast today. Great to have a team podcast.
Yes.
Thank you to everybody that's been listening, sharing, and watching. If you want to watch it, you can watch it on YouTube and Spotify. And as always, everybody, have a magical week.